afternoon all. I'm sure you're in that post-lunch energy slump, so there is a promise of gratuitous video if you can bear with me for just half of the presentation. Commander Peter Pipkin, I work in Maritime Capability, which is the Royal Navy's department for watching, developing and identifying future capabilities out to and often beyond 30 years or so. To give you a bit of a picture of what that means, if you've ever watched a sci-fi movie within the last 20, 30 years or so, imagine what the inside of all those spaceships, etc. looked like. It's my job to work out how we bring those into warships, and increasingly so as technology moves ever faster and faster, how I bring some of that in sooner. Also, as the Fleet Robotics Officer, I probably have one of the best job titles in the Navy. When I started this job, I said it was the best job title, but the first Sea Lord pointed out that he had a pretty good job title too. And most of what you've heard today, I will reflect a little. So all the reasons that we've seen over the last 30, 40 minutes about why unmanned and autonomous systems are of interest, exactly the same for us in Defence and the Royal Navy. In some cases, they will offer us efficiencies. Being able to design a platform to do just its job and not look after the soft, squishy operator inside is of benefit to me. In some areas, it will deliver effectiveness. It will enable us to do our jobs and deliver capability better just because of the technologies that are coming along and the new methods of delivering them. But most importantly, there are lots and lots of use cases where it will enable me to deliver operations more safely. And a perfect example is in the area of mine countermeasures. If I can move people further away from those mines and use the machines to do what we would refer to as the dull, dirty and dangerous, then that has to be a good thing for everybody. And that's just one example. And indeed, there are many, and we've heard a couple of them through this morning, that we can expand on. A very old picture to start perhaps a somewhat futuristic discussion, but just bear with me for 60 seconds or so. The reason this is important, and I know a number of you will have seen this before, is it shows a picture here of a boat called Turbines, which was an early steam turbine powered boat. And the chap who invented this, called Charles Parsons, had been trying to sell steam turbine technology to the Royal Navy for some time, but the Royal Navy and the Admiralty knew better. They'd been in charge of the seas for some time. So rather than just be turned away again and again, Charles Parsons took the issue into his own hands. And in 1897, he turned up in the Solent for the Queen's Jubilee Review and effectively showed them what this platform could do. He steamed up and he steamed down and effectively just made a nuisance of himself. The Royal Navy dispatched picket boats to go and apprehend him, but he nearly swamped them with his wake. Such was the genuinely game-changing technology of steam turbines. From then, all future warships were designed and built to be steam turbine powered, and HMS Dreadnought in 1905 was the first of those into service. It is just a small example of how the power of demonstration can have a significant effect. And we delivered a demonstration of our own last year, some of you may have heard of, called Unmanned Warrior. And Unmanned Warrior tried to do a lot of things, and I'll try and capture those over the next 10 minutes or so. What was it? I'll start with what it wasn't. It wasn't a procurement competition. We didn't get all of the system providers to come and show us their toys so that we would buy the best ones. It was about collaborating in a different way. It was about exploring how those capabilities can offer benefit to defence. And we've heard, again, a number of times in the last couple of presentations and this morning, that a lot of this journey is very much about what does the customer want. And I have to tell you, we don't always know, and I'll come back to that. It was also a forcing function, because whilst we can sit around and talk about these things and discuss them and have some great debates, it's only when you sit at somebody's desk and say, I am going to deploy these systems in this airspace, water space, do they actually have to make a decision. So not only do you have the conversation, but you actually force through some of those issues and processes, which potentially are barriers to doing things more quickly. A potentially complex picture, which I'm going to hopefully simplify for you, but this is a really powerful and important picture, part of our output from Unmanned Warrior. And what you're looking at here are 5 systems operating autonomously together. And when I say autonomously, I largely genuinely mean autonomously, and language is really difficult here, as I'm sure you know. You have unmanned, you have autonomous, you have automated, you have highly automated, and as a community, we could probably do no worse than come to some agreement of what some of those mean. But for the purposes of this, those systems were not programmed to do that. Effectively, we programmed a task. We said, go and search this area of water for mines or objects of interest. So you can see a couple of yellow ones going up and down. They're unmanned underwater vehicles operating autonomously. They're also talking to a couple of surface vessels. You may just be able to see those in pink. If the underwater vehicle finds something of interest, it'll tell the surface vehicle. The surface vehicle may retask the other systems autonomously to go and look at that. It may retask how they're going to search that area of interest. The surface vessel is also talking to an unmanned air vehicle, and that's the blue one doing circles, effectively providing over-the-horizon comms networks. But the bottom line is, in about 10 or 11 clicks of a mouse, we just told the system to go and tell me what's over there and report back with anything that's of interest or a threat. And the systems did it. Now, this was interesting because it was, we believe, the first time in the world that we'd seen this over-the-horizon, collaborative, truly autonomous technology. It was a multinational, multi-industrial and academic endeavour, and it was a snapshot of part of what Unmanned Warrior was about, which was about exploring those new relationships and how collaboratively and collectively we can do more together. This is what we often refer to as small map, big hands. Don't worry too much about the detail. But up in the northwest of Scotland, in the Outer Hebrides predominantly, we ran the Unmanned Warrior demonstration last year, and we had about 50 systems from 40 providers, and they were not just the traditional defence providers you might imagine, and indeed most were there. But we did have people from academia. We worked very closely with the National Oceanography Centre to deliver the the UK's largest deployment of robotic maritime underwater systems. We worked with lots of smaller and medium enterprises. Very often those teams where the real innovation is coming through, but often struggles to make its way through to the customer, let alone to the market. And it wasn't just about vehicles. Again, when we talk about unmanned and autonomous systems, we often just think of quadcopters and yellow submarines, which are great, and I am a committed geek, so I love all that stuff. But really, it's the autonomy that's going to deliver the benefits and the real game changers in how we deliver capability. So hopefully, here's your promised gratuitous video, just a clip of what we did last year.
No longer are the militaries of the world the only people who in some way owned technology development. How do we continue to operate in a 21st century maritime battle space in order to maintain a warfighting cutting edge?
In October 2016, over 40 organizations came together with Joint Warrior, the largest military training exercise in Europe, to explore and understand the potential of unmanned systems. Unmanned Warrior brought industry, academia and military together, collaborating as never before, sharing knowledge and working to accelerate progress in the adoption of maritime autonomous systems. Over 100 missions were delivered in response to tasking by Joint Warrior, and over 50 systems took part, with the majority outputting directly into ASA, the Integrated Command and Control. This was the first time so many unmanned systems had been integrated together. Participants were tasked to understand the environment, locate threats, and counter potential risks, demonstrating credible capability options.
We set out a couple of years ago to challenge ourselves. It's been hugely exciting and is actually posing for us now a number of questions about where we want to take this next.
Innovation has always been something that has helped our armed forces stay at the cutting edge. So an exercise like this is going to be so valuable in informing the kind of decisions that the Royal Navy and the rest of the armed forces are going to have to make in the years to come.
There is a lot more on the Royal Navy's YouTube channel. I'm sure you want to go and pick that up and have a look at a bit more of the detail. Unmanned Warrior was just part of a journey, and indeed the journey itself was as, if not more important than 3 weeks in October and a couple of weeks in September. And already we are starting to reuse some of that framework to explore other technologies and other potential options. We've already this year run Information Warrior, which is looking at things like artificial intelligence in ships, how we exploit big data and data analytics. And next year there is a Logistics Warrior where we're starting to look at how, and I'm sure unmanned and autonomy will play a part in that, we do things like resupply and mobility. And I hope many of you have seen the recent announcement of the Defence Innovation Accelerator Challenge for the last mile resupply, where again I know much of this technology is going to play into that space. We are convinced, because some of you will know there's this thing called a defence inflation curve that means things get slowly more complex and expensive through generations, and ultimately you can buy this platform that can do absolutely everything, but you can only afford one of them. And we need to work out how we break that model, and buying perhaps cheaper, perhaps even expendable, but more flexible and adaptable capabilities might be one way of doing that for us. But of course there is the wider spectrum of issues to be explored as well, and regulation is the perfect example. We couldn't bypass the regulation last year in delivering Unmanned Warrior, but we could force some of those issues to get to a position to allow us to deliver it. There's the issue of how we do more of this collaboratively for mutual benefit. So dual-use, multi-use systems. I mentioned our work with the National Oceanography Centre. We're using pretty much the same vehicles that they use for scientific and academic research. We can be cleverer and better about how we share those opportunities across not just defence, not just government, but amongst communities like this. And the power of things like today is in those conversations that I know we've been having through the workshops and the networking. So how would I summarise? A lot of this journey started by realising we don't have all the answers. We probably don't even have all the questions. And you will probably sit there going, but you know defence and you know Royal Navy operations far better than we do. But actually what we learned last year was by bringing together a community, often with very disparate and completely different experiences, we can truly start to have some productive conversations about how this technology is going to deliver military or naval capability in the future. Because as the Fleet Robotics Officer, I'm clearly biased, it's in my job title, but I am convinced, as I think most of you are, these technologies are coming to our everyday lives. And they are not just an evolutionary technology, they are fundamentally going to change how we can deliver all sorts of things, whether it's coffee, whether it's in surveillance and reconnaissance at sea. But it is not just for us, it's not just the next biggest, shiniest gun that goes a bit further and a bit faster. These can fundamentally change how we operate many, not all, but many of our capabilities. And we need to have that conversation with communities like you, because very often you understand some of the issues, and particularly the technologies, better than we do. We can be we are a hierarchical and dogmatic society. If you ask me how I would like to use some of these capabilities today, I'll probably describe how I do operations today without a man in or without a person controlling them. But we can be much more imaginative, and that's what I hope we get out of sessions like this. We learned about the importance of capability versus technology, and again this comes back to the conversation started this morning about what does the customer want, and we do sometimes get in a circular debate about, well, what do you want? Well, what can you give me? Well, I don't know, but and again we need to work through those, and I sense we're not the only sector having those conversations, probably because they do offer genuinely transformational opportunities. And most importantly for me, we need to have the conversation and we need to explore what it means for these machines to integrate with our current capabilities and, importantly, with our people. Ultimately, the Royal Navy will have ships with people in for some time for lots of good reasons, and we need to work out which of those tasks we want our people to do, which our people are best at, which tasks we want the machines to do. And, of course, there'll be a slider between those two, and that may move and change over time. And one of the reasons why events such as this are really powerful is because, of course, that isn't a conversation we can have in isolation. Indeed, I don't believe any of the sectors you work in can have those conversations in isolation, because the ubiquity of these technologies is going to come very quickly at a pace and a breadth that we probably, even those of us that are biased, truly understand yet. Thank you. you.